Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So when I looked around at 1 p.m. when church was supposed to start, I thought to myself, looking a little light. The word must have got out about who's speaking. But then in true Oakstone fashion, we filled it out, So I'd like to start today in Psalm 39. Psalm 39 and verse 4. O Lord, make me known my end and what is my measure of my days. Let me know how fleeting I am. Behold, you have made my days a few handbreadths, and my lifetime is nothing before you. Surely all mankind stands as a mere breath. It's funny, when we're teenagers, or I should say when I was a teenager, I didn't think I was immortal, but, I thought I would be around for a long, long time, particularly if you saw how I drove a car and some of the other stupid things I did. It's like you're never going to get old, right? But then you do get old, you get older, and you realize that life is pretty fragile. You start to understand the fragility of life, and somewhere around midlife, and I'm not saying I'm there, but we start to think about the world. We start to think about the world after we're gone. My boss, Jeff, at the company I work for, he has an expression that he says quite a bit, and he's a little bit older, he's 76, but he says, no one makes it out alive. And I really liked that. I thought that was clever. And when my dad was going through cancer treatments, he was pretty down, and I was trying to make him feel better, and I shared that with him. And he really liked it. And, months later, I started hearing him share it with other people. So it really resonated. But, Dad didn't make it out alive. And I know I'm probably not going to make it out alive. And I know you're probably not going to make it out alive, barring Jesus Christ returning. We don't know how much time we have. We don't know if we're going to make it till tomorrow. James 4:14. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Last month, many of you know I was out in California. I was in San Diego for a conference. It was called the JNC, Joint Navigation Conference. In my company, we build GPS receivers, and the focus is all about navigation, particularly for DoD stuff. And it's a big conference. There's like 700 people that attend this thing. And the hotel where they put this all on, or where they had the event, they catered lunch every day. And man, can you imagine 700 people all at once eating? It was really impressive how they brought all that food out. But they didn't have quite enough tables, so there was an overflow room, and you want to kind of eat with your team, but a lot of days I found a seat and I sat with random people. And so one day I sat down, and I'm talking to this. Beside me is an older gentleman. He's probably, if I had to guess, I'd say he was mid-70s. And the conference is it's unique because it's made up of people from industry, from DoD, and then there's a bunch of people from academia. So this guy was from academia. He was a PhD, super smart guy. And in talking to him, I found out he was a Christian guy, and we had a little bit in common there. But he never stopped talking. He was one of these guys that, he didn't have trouble finding words, and he just constantly was talking about his work, his contribution to the science. And it was really, really interesting, but, a lot of the stuff, he's way smarter than me, and I didn't even really fully understand what he was saying, but he just kept going on and on and on about his achievements. And so I thought, I'll change the topic a little bit. I'll ask him about his kids. And, secretly, I'm like, that way I can talk about I can brag on little David. So I asked him if he had kids, and he said, no, I don't have kids. And then he said something that surprised me. He said, no, my legacy is my work. His legacy is his work. So when I got back to the room that night, just for fun, I looked up the definition. What is the definition of legacy? So Merriam-Webster, a couple definitions. Definition 1, a gift by will, especially of money or other personal property. The concept of leaving behind money or an inheritance is actually a biblical one, Proverbs 13:22. You don't have to turn there. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. So that's definition one. Definition two, something transmitted by or received from an ancestor or predecessor or from the past. Now, when I think of legacy, this is a little bit closer to what I usually think of. It's more of a, in a broader sense, we're sort of talking about leaving behind our mark, right? We're gone and we left our mark on society. And it's kind of a universal human concept, and this is true, I think, whether you're religious or not. I mean, generally speaking, we all want our existence here on earth to have mattered, right? We want to have left some kind of a mark. And if we're being really honest, well, let me say, if I'm being honest, I kind of would like to be remembered. There was a paper published in New Ideas in Psychology, not something I read very often, but this is really recent. It was in April. And the title of this paper was The Desire to be Remembered, a Review and Analysis of Legacy Motivations and Behaviors. And I'm just going to read a quick snippet from the introduction because I think it's really fascinating. It said, individual human beings have long strived to create and curate an enduring post-mortem reputation, their legacy. And they do this in various ways, such as via sports achievement, creative works, having children, leaving a financial endowment, philanthropy, passing down family heirlooms, or extreme attention-grabbing acts. I'll skip down a little bit to towards the end. It says, what is largely missing from these previous examples is any explicit reference to the fact that legacy centers on, rather curiously, it centers on our reputation of the self after death. And I think that's almost like by definition, right? Because if I think about my legacy, what is Eric's legacy? By definition, I'm talking about myself, thinking about myself. And if you go through these examples that this thing just mentioned, just a couple of them, it's like, well, why did you want to have kids? I know Chelsea and I talked about this a lot. It's like, well, I really want the Hughes family name to live on. I want my name to live on. Or I've seen and heard this before. Here's this family heirloom. Here's a shotgun. Here's whatever. And you can always remember me by it. Or, hey, I'm going to give the church a big donation. And they said if I gave them a big enough donation, they'd put a plaque on the side of the building and they'd put my name on it. Sometimes nonprofit organizations, not sometimes, this happens all the time, they twist the donation process into sort of a reward system, right? Well, if you give this donation, we'll give you a calendar. If you give this donation, we'll put your name on a plaque. If you give this donation, we'll name the building after you. But if you think about that, doesn't it sort of, in a weird way, feel like we're trying to build up treasure on earth after we die? I can't help but think of Matthew 6:19. Matthew 6:19, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. It's funny, though. It's in our nature. We want to build up treasure, wealth. We want to be known. We want to be liked. Even after we're gone, we want this. I want this. Being honest here. So here, I have a little question for the audience, a little audience interactive. It's a test that you can't fail, and there's no reward. So it's great. I want you to raise your hands. You don't have to say anything. Can anyone in the room just try to think of this? And if you can think of it, then raise your hand. Can anyone in the room think of the first names of all 4 of your grandparents? Man, not as many. Okay, come on. Okay, I'd say Most everyone. Okay. So that was to test the waters to see what kind of interaction we would get. Now comes the real question. How many of you can think of the names, the first names, of your 8 great-grandparents? Whoa, come, Miranda. No way. You have ancestry on your phone or something? Okay. But that's cheating, right? You don't have that memorized. Okay, we'll have to talk later. So wait a minute. That's less than 3 generations. You don't know, that's like 100 years. You don't even know your great-grandparents' first names? Guys. If you don't know their first names, I'm guessing you don't probably know much about them at all. What they did for a living? Were they good? Were they bad? Were they Christian? Do we know anything about our ancestors from 100 years ago? I don't. Most of them, I knew a couple of my great-grandparents, and I know their names, but that's it. Do you think in 100 years anyone will know your name? Now, maybe you have a famous ancestor, but do you really know anything about them? I mean, aside from what maybe a little snippet you've read? Probably not. The point is, back in Matthew 6, moth and rust destroy both the physical and the memory. Now, this is kind of depressing, right? Just to be super clear, I am not at all saying that what we do doesn't matter. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. What we do matters immensely. All of our ancestors, what they did, it mattered. But back to the question of our legacy. I guess what I'm asking here is when we talk about our legacy, what's our motivation? Why do we do the things that we do? Are we doing good just because we want the recognition? Are we hoping people will see us and think, oh, Eric's so good because of what he does? And are we doing the same thing post-mortem, or am I doing all this because I want people to remember me? Remember how good Eric was? So going back to Matthew 6, let's start back at verse 1. Matthew 6, verse 1. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. If our motivation for doing good is wrong, it says right here, we lose our reward. Continuing in verse 2. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. There's an interesting way to think about legacy. If you think about legacy as, whether it's an inheritance or whether you're leaving your mark or whatever it is, you can think of it as a gift. I'm leaving a gift behind for the next generation, and when they come along, they're going to pick up said gift. Well, if you're leaving a gift, it says right here, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Continuing in verse 5, and when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and on the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Again, this is all about our motivation. So skipping down to verse 16, and when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Again, going back to the beginning, if our motivation for doing good is wrong, we lose our reward. Okay, so all the kiddos are at this really cool music workshop. Do we have any kids that didn't go? Is there anyone in here 3 to 12? Okay, awesome. So I'm going to go to a very extreme example here, but I'm going to be very careful. And I apologize in advance if this is difficult to hear. But as many of you know, back on May 6th, less than 3 miles from here, there was something that happened at the Allen Premium Outlets. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Okay, if you don't, you can Google it. I got a whole bunch of notes here, but I'm gonna skip the details. One thing I thought was really interesting and really sad is they interviewed a dad. He was actually a firefighter who happened to be there when all this went down. He's fine, his kids were fine. And they said, the interviewer asked him, how it had impacted him. And he said, I don't wear flip-flops anymore. And the interviewer asked, well, what? Why not? He said, you can't run in flip-flops. This event, what I would like to do is talk about it from 2 different perspectives. Think about legacy. First, I want to think about the legacy of the shooter. The legacy of the shooter. Because he does have a legacy. This guy does have a legacy. He left his mark. And as the media always does, they plastered his name everywhere. You can get online. If you try, you can find his picture, details about him, and it's all over the place. And just like that, he was made famous by what he did, or infamous, I guess, but it's out there. And there was an op-ed, I found this op-ed from the LA Times by Julian Peterson and James Dinsley. This is back from 2019, but the title of the article was, Nearly all mass shooters have 4 things in common. 4 things in common. And one of them is that they seek recognition, fame, notoriety, whatever you want to call it. And the quote from the article says, but in the age of 24-hour rolling news and social media, there is now a script to follow that promises notoriety and death. And he got it. So now, I want to talk about the legacy of the police officer. On June 28th, just a couple weeks ago, a week and a half ago, Allen PD released the body cam footage. Has anyone seen this? Okay, a few of you have. The video starts with this officer telling 2 kids and their mom to wear their seatbelt and to be good. And next thing you know, you hear this burst of gunfire. If you've ever been around guns, and I grew up on a farm, so I've been around them a little bit, when you hear the sound of gunfire, it's ironic that Justin walks in the door. Justin knows the sound of gunfire. When you hear the sound of gunfire, it's very clear, if you've been around it, the difference between something like a pistol, like a 9mm or a .380 or whatever, and a higher caliber rifle, like an AR-15, an AK-47. It's instantly you know. And when you listen to this video, you instantly know it's a rifle. And it's a semi-automatic rifle because it's bang, 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 bang. This guy, this police officer, man, he does everything by the book. He goes to his patrol car, he calls it in. Immediately, he says it's a mass shooter. He gets his rifle. And then this guy runs towards the gunfire. Within a couple of minutes, he has engaged the shooter and he has eliminated the threat. And he saved countless lives. This guy, this police officer, if he wanted to be famous, He could have been on every news, he could have been all over the news. He could have been on Good Morning America. I don't know, 2020, is that even still a thing? I guess I'm dating myself here. Nightline, he could have been a spokesperson for the NRA. I mean, this guy could have become famous, wealthy overnight because of what he did. But he didn't. He didn't want to be identified. We don't even know if this guy is religious. We don't know if he's Christian. We don't know anything about the guy, but we know what he did. We know that he followed a Christian principle. Matthew 6:1. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen. He doesn't want to be seen. He did this good deed. He saved lives. He's not looking for a reward. He's not looking to build up treasure today. This guy is an inspiration to me. He didn't want the glory for himself. There was actually some controversy about releasing the body cam footage because, a lot of people have been through a lot. It's hard to watch. I am so grateful that they released this footage. I hope it inspires people to become police officers. I hope it inspires people to do what this guy did, and not inspires people, and I hope it helps to keep people from being somehow strangely inspired by this evil that is mass shootings. Okay, I got through that. We all have a legacy. We all have a legacy. When we leave this earth, we are leaving something behind. We are leaving our mark. Some of us will be leaving inheritance, if we're blessed, to our children, financially, or property, maybe our grandchildren. And we will leave a mark. Whether we want to leave a mark or not, we will leave a mark in everything that we do, in how we behave, how we interact with others. It matters. We all influence each other in ways that sometimes it's difficult to understand, but we do. If you would, turn over to Colossians 3. Colossians 3 and verse 1. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on the earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. And when Christ, who is in your life, appears, then you will appear with him in glory. Our focus should be on Jesus, not on what other people think. We are here to serve him. He is the master. He is the creator. Continuing in verse 5, put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming. In these you too once walked when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. Here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all and in all. Instead of worrying about how other people see us, instead of worrying about our reputation, instead of worrying about building up treasure, perhaps we should focus on how God sees us. Have we put to death what is earthly inside of us? Have I? I'm trying. Continuing in verse 12. Put on then, as God chooses ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other. As the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive. And above all these things, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, giving thanks to God the Father through him. I love these verses. We put off the old self. Then we put on compassion, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, forgiveness, love, peace. We let the word of Christ dwell in us. We sing psalms. We worship and praise him. And we do all of this with thankfulness, with giving hearts, with hearts of gratitude. Have we done all of this? Have I done all of this? This should be the focus. This should be the focus. Now, I have a note in my notes. That doesn't make sense. I have a note here that says, insert joke here. I'm going to not do that. Continuing in verse 18. Wives, submit to your husbands, as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. Bondservants, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance of your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ, for the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrong he has done, and there is no partiality. It says to work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men. Again, what, are we laying up treasure here? Or are we laying up treasure in heaven? Are we doing this to be seen by others? Or are we doing this to be seen by God? Knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. So we serve Jesus Christ, we serve the King, and we receive an inheritance from him, a legacy, if you will, from him. He died for us, and it's free. It's free. It's a free gift. Our Savior is the Alpha and the Omega. He is the beginning and the end. He is the King of Kings, and yet he died for me, he died for you, he died for all of us, even though we really, really don't deserve it. That should be the legacy. That should be our legacy. That's the message we should leave behind, this amazing gift. Anything else, it just pales in comparison. But hey, whatever we do leave, it's a free gift. It's a free gift to those who remain, and we shouldn't let our left hand know what our right hand is doing. It's for them. Matthew 6:4, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but again, our treasure is in heaven, not on the earth. We should stop trying to build up treasure, and we really should try to stop building up treasure after our deaths. It's not about us. It's about him. For me, if it's possible at all, I would like to leave little David an inheritance. If that's how the chips fall. Not a lot, though. There's been lots of studies that say that's a bad idea if you leave your kids too much money. It doesn't work out well usually. You just look at Hollywood and it tears people apart. I hope, I pray that Chelsea and I will have trained him up in the way that he should go. And yes, ultimately, I'd be lying if I told you I didn't want my life to matter. I want my life to matter. But I want to die knowing, I want to go to bed tonight knowing that I might not wake up. I want to know that I served my Savior, my Creator, the best that I absolutely could. Because I know in a generation or two or three, as we just proved, no one will know my name. So while I'm here, I am going to do the absolute best I can to serve him. I am going to do my best to be about his business, because ultimately, Jesus is my legacy. Jesus is your legacy. He's our legacy.